made against the Talmud that go back really to probably the codification of the Talmud in the third century. Talk a little bit, Jan, about your process, how it is that you got involved in this issue, and what brought you to this incredible research, which I hope you publish as a book because it's very valuable.
Well, let's see. Probably about 5 years ago, I came across these quotes, and at the time, I figured they were probably true. They had sort of citations connected with them. I had been meaning to fact check them for a number of years, hadn't sat down to do it. I was just going to pick a random number. I do a lot of forensic type research and fact checking, and so I had planned to do that and just hadn't sat down and done it. And then last year, in about January, early February, a guy I was doing a series of shows with, Lloyd Young, and we were doing a series of shows on Islam, exposing Islam and whatnot. And there were a number of trolls in the chat that kept jumping in and saying, oh, well, what about the Jewish Talmud and the evil Jews and this and that? You can't, you're ignoring the evil Jews. And so, and you can't do a focused discussion on Islam without somebody trying to, change the subject onto something else. And so last January, early February, we took a random handful of these quotes purported to be from the Talmud and decided to fact check them. It was probably like 6 or 10 of them. And there's, about 59, 60 of them that float around the internet the most heavily. And then you can find, others that float around there also. But so out of the main 60, I took 10 of these we took 10 of these and started fact checking them. And right away we noticed about a third of them were false. And so started digging around a lot more. And then it was probably February, March, April last year, I spent about a good solid month and a half every day laying out the quotes and just trying to organize them and get them in a place that made sense. So what I was doing is I would, put this stuff up on screen in a Word document, and then I would go into the Safari Online, which is the online version of the Jewish Talmud, and go there and then try to, find all of the original quotes and just place them with each of these quotes claimed to be from the Talmud. And so this took, quite a long time to accomplish. And then as I got them laid out, it appeared that about 75% of them were fakes. And so then at that point, I said, well, if this many are fake, where the heck are they coming from? And so, doing the series on Islam, decided to, at that point, I decided to start looking into the Islamic texts, the Quran, the Hadiths, the Sunnah, the Sharia laws, the reliance of the traveler, the Hinadea, all of this stuff. And so it took me, 2 months, almost 2 months to verify that the quotes were fakes within the Jewish Talmud. And it took me 2 days to verify about 75% of them within Islam, and that they were there in Islam. So, and the paper has gone through several name changes. It used to be called The Terrible Talmud versus the Cuddly Quran. And right now it's titled Judaism versus Islam, The Truth Exposed. But, so then it was like, well, is there a bait and switch going on? So then the remainder of the quotes that I hadn't verified in the Talmud yet, the other 25%, I decided to focus on those, which is about 15 more. And then when it got down to it, there was only one out of the 60 or out of the 59 that ended up being true. And 2 out of the 60 were actually taken from the exact same passage and misconstrued. So I just, uh, combine those two into ones, just to so it wasn't so repetitive in the paper. But so it ended up that only 1.6% of these quotes were true, and the other 98.3 whatever percent were false. And then, and just to go into this for a minute, and I read this a bit ago, and this is our third time starting. So, as they say, third time's the charm. So let me see if I can find this thing here. Got to pull it up.
Mhm.
So, okay, so I found one quote or citation claimed to be from the Talmud that was accurate out of 59. So that's 1.694% accuracy and 98.306% inaccuracy. And then I found 12 or 20.338% of the quotes that were taken from the Talmud text they were falsely claimed to be from the Talmud, but they were from other Jewish texts, and but they were still taken out of context. And out of those, 4 or 6.779% were entirely fabricated. And then out of the 59, another 15 or 25.423% of the quotes claimed to be from the Talmud were entirely fabricated. And no reference, like these quotes that claim to be from David Libra, blah blah blah. These things were entire fabrications. And then or 32 point, for 19 total that were fabrications, or 32.2%, or almost 1/3 total were complete fabrications. So then I started going on, because as a Christian, I thought this was really interesting. I bought into this stuff. We're doing this show on Islam. All these people, all these trolls, these GDL people, they're a hate terrorist group. They try to encourage people to go into synagogues and do shootings and stuff like that. They're sort of tied to the neo-Nazis and Islamists both. They were, constantly trolling and saying, "Oh, well, then I must be a Jew because I'm, trying to, debunk these claims. I'm Danish and Welsh, and I'm a Christian, and I just wanted to know the truth of this stuff." So, and then the irony of all of this was that I found compatible or similar quotes for 56 out of 59 in the Islamic text. So 94.915% were actually located in the Talmud text, and it only took me 2 days to find the majority of them there. And then I spent several more days looking for some of the ones that were harder to find, but it ended up being, you know, almost 95% of them were easily located within the Islamic text. So there was a total bait and switch going on here. And the numbers were almost completely reversed between what was claimed against the Judaism and what was true for Islam. So
Well,
this was something that I found very, stark, and it really alerted my attention. So what was going on here? And what it really appears is, in the Islamic text, you see a lot of quotes that they're required to kill or subjugate the Jews and the Christians or the kafir, and they make a certain emphasis on Jewry. And and you have to pay what's called the jizya tax, which is the capitation tax, if you live in an Islamic country. So if you don't pay the capitation tax, you are decapitated, right? So basically, it's and Islam claims to abrogate Judaism and Christianity. And that was another thing that I found really interesting in the Islamic text. But so all of this stuff ended up being in Islam, and so that was a very startling realization. And I don't know if I can share screen on yours. I can try here and show you some of these.
yes, but let me just comment briefly. I mean, what you're talking about then, if in fact this is the case, has to be viewed as maybe one of the greatest forgeries of modern history. I mean, you're saying that there were people who either were sympathetic to Islam, or they were Muslim, or they were just anti-Jewish, and they took Islamic texts and they subscribed it to the Talmud. Now, and these are the worst
Well,
aspects.
to make people think that what was going on in Islam was in fact Talmudic. Now,
Right.
during our series of shows on Islam, I had a guy named Todd on who had discovered that Baron von Sabatendorf, who founded he was one of the key founders of the Thule Society that founded the Nazi Party,
Yes.
was in fact a closet Muslim.
Well, let me
And
just
so,
comment. Can I comment on that also? I mean, it's not been proven that this was a document, but the so-called table talk of Hitler's conversations that were recorded by a journalist in 1943. He and the people sitting around the table spoke at length about their not only their admiration for Islam, but their belief that the greatest tragedy in European history was the victory of Charles Martel in the Battle of Cartiers, where he stopped the Islamic advance through France. And that had Islam taken over Europe, Europe would have been much more pure racially and much more
right.
militant,
Well,
and that Christianity was a Judaizing of Europe.
and and then you had King Jan of Poland, who whom I share the same name with. He united the European armies and pushed the Islamists out of Europe as well, and that was part of the Crusades. But see, the Islam had done 500 or more invasions into Europe and had taken millions of slaves and murdered millions of people. And then, interestingly, the Catholic Church also gets this bait and switch blame. Oh, well, the evil crusades against Islam, who were the poor victims of the Christians in these 12 crusades when Islam had done 500 invasions into Europe. And so, like I said,
Right.
Islam abrogates in the Sharia law. It abrogates Christianity and Judaism. So let me read this quote to you out of the Sharia law. It's from the Reliance of the Traveler, the finality of the Prophet's message, W 4.4, page 848 through 849. The faith of the Jews was that of whoever adhered to the Torah and the Sunnah of Moses, upon whom be peace, until the coming of Jesus. When Jesus came, whomever held fast to the Torah and the Sunnah of Moses without giving them up and following Jesus was lost. The faith of the Christians was whoever adhered to the evangel and precepts of Jesus. Their faith was valid and acceptable until the coming of Muhammad. Those of them who did not follow Muhammad and give up the Sunnah of Jesus and the Evangel were lost. The foregoing is not contradicted by the Hadith. And of course, that's a circular argument because they're citing their own texts of what Muhammad said himself. Relating to that verse, surely those who believe, those of Jewry, the Christians, and the Sabians, whoever has faith in Allah and the last day was allowed by Allah the revealing. Whoever seeks a religion other than Islam will never have it accepted of him, and he will be of those who have truly failed in the hereafter. And that's from Quran 3:8-5. For the Hadith merely confirms that no one's way or spiritual works are acceptable until they conform to the sacred law of Muhammad. Now, for those of you who don't know, Muhammad was a mass murderer. He killed probably 800 to 3,000 people himself. He was into child marriage and whatnot. His youngest wife, Aisha, was 6 when they married, and she was 9 when they consummated the marriage, 9 years and a day old. Um, and it's very, in my
Well,
opinion,
let me.
psychopathic and warring.
All right. Yeah, and I always thought that there was something very odd and very strange about the charges that I've heard made by supposedly by Christians about the Talmud and the things that are in the Talmud, because it just didn't sound to me
Well,
like.
and to that
Let me
point,
just. Yeah.
let me just add to that point. We actually found a lot of people pretending to be Christians online who were spreading this stuff, who were closet Islamists. I did a show last March on Alex Jones discussing this very issue.
Okay, no, and I think that it's something we could do a little history. The Talmud is I don't want to go too far here, but the Talmud is just basically law books that
Right. It's
help.
like if you were going if you went to
Yeah,
Harvard Law School and you wanted to sit there and read Harvard law books all day, that's what it's like reading the Talmud. And it's,
that's right.
if you're having a sleepless night instead of counting sheep, break out the Talmud.
Exactly. And the Talmud is nothing but commentary on the Torah, and it puts it into a legal state where Jews can then practice their faith, particularly after the destruction of Israel by the Romans when it was codified. And the things that are ascribed to it always seemed a little strange to me. I'm just going to mention one thing in particular because this is something that is recounted by a Catholic scholar, E. Michael Jones, who I have a lot of respect for, except in this one area where
I
he goes
know him.
completely off the rails. And that is that he talks about how in the 7th century or 8th century, a Jewish apostate by the name of Nicholas Donin went to the Pope at the time and said, the Talmud says that Jesus is going to be burning in hell up to his neck in human excrement forever. And and I want you to destroy them. And the Pope, he didn't want to go through it, so he sent the responsibility to King Louis of France, who burned the Talmuds. He burned 15 crates of Talmuds right at the spot where the Hotel de Ville is located on the Seine today. I mean, you can actually see that. And that's when the whole smear against the Talmud began. And these things have never made sense to me. I mean, the Talmud doesn't talk about Jesus. The Talmud wasn't even written in a
Well,
Christian
let me
country.
let
It
me
was written
let
in
me
Babylonia.
okay, so let me go into this. And in fact, I can share this on screen. And for those listening to your show who want a copy of this, what I'm doing is for those who make contributions of $10 or more to contact at logosmedia.com through PayPal, or you can do Cash App to $ Logos Media, capital L, capital M. I will send that out to you if you include your email address. But let me share the screen here so I can show the audience some of this stuff. Now, I do have the exact citations for those. And so let's see here. I'm going to just share this screen. Sorry, we're going to get a little.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. All right, so this claim comes from Getting 57A. Says Jesus is being boiled in hot excrement. Jesus is in hell and is being punished by being boiled in semen. Christians boiled in dung. So hell is a Christian, not a Jewish concept. The part claiming Christians are boiled in dung does not exist. Furthermore, it was well known that Jesus mocked the Pharisees, a sin under their laws, for their pill puller mental masturbation over the law and for their forgetting humanness in the process. Hence, Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the New Covenant or New Testament. Notice also that Jesus is called a sinner who sought their well being. But so in this section, they're talking about this goes back to Balaam from the Old Testament, from Numbers and Deuteronomy. Balaam said to them, "You shall not seek their peace and their welfare for all these days." Deuteronomy 23:7. Balaam said to him, "He is being cooked in boiling semen." So that what they do is they take these and then they misconstrue them. And what I did is for each single passage, I connect it directly to the text in the Talmud. And for those of you who say, "Well, how do we know that the translation is correct?" What you can do is you can open this in Chrome browser and just use Google Translate to translate the Hebrew right there for you again, so you can double check it yourself. But and
Fantastic.
then so then Jesus said to him, "Their welfare ye shall seek, their misfortune you shall not seek." So Jesus is calling for their well-being here.
Right.
Okay, but there is a footnote here. Jesus responded to the innkeeper's wife as unattractive. Yeshua ben Panera or Pariah. Now, this is also another character that they claim is Jesus in the Talmud. So there's another one, Ben Stata, that they also claim is Jesus. But uh, uh, Joshua ben Pariah uh, could not have taken place any later than 76 BC. So this is 100 years before or no, actually 60 years before Christ. Or no, sorry, 100 years, because that would have been 30 AD.
Hmm.
And so, so it's almost 100 years difference there. So, they omit all of this stuff, but, there's a weird claim here. And then what they try to do is conflate Balaam with Jesus. And throughout this stuff, they'll say that this Balaam character is Jesus. But then you can see in many of these passages that Balaam and Jesus are clearly discussed as two different people. So here we have Balaam, and then here in the same passage is Jesus the Nazarene. Now, interestingly, this Jesus the Nazarene right here is not considered the Jesus of the New Testament. So it is this guy, Yeshua ben Pariah, who is considered the Jesus of the New Testament. So it's really interesting how muddied it gets, but this guy is too early. But, so we see, the several different characters here being claimed to be Jesus. Is it Ben Stata? Is it Yeshua ben Perea? Is it Balaam? And so all of these guys are constantly conflated. But, so Balaam was a false prophet who literally did divining with his penis and fornicated with jackasses. So all of this is blamed on Jesus and conflated. So, and there's other texts like this where let's see if I can find the last one. He who disobeys the rabbis deserves death and will be punished by being boiled in hot excrement in hell. Again, hell is a Christian, not a Jewish concept. So they add these extra elements to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But so, when we go through, we can see what is actually being said in these sections and see how they fake this stuff. So
Incredible.
the words of the sages, so basically anyone who at the time was violating the Pharisees and what the Pharisees said was guilty, right? So this is where the break off from Christianity and Judaism really happens to begin with. So it also gives you an understanding of why Jesus separated off from Judaism and and why Christianity was formed. But at the same, it's because of the pill pull. It was accused of the Pharisees that they were getting too caught up in their laws and legal codes and forgetting the humanity and to follow logos in the process. So it became all about laws. And there was one passage where you couldn't walk through a hallway or a tunnel with a board over it, at a certain time of day and this kind of stuff. And it just got too much. So this was the division between our two religions. And, and then, so what I do is I also go in and I compare Islam directly to the Judaic texts, and I do this throughout. So what we see is in all of these, like, Barakoth 58a under the subheading oil of anointing, and Barakoth 58a in which gentile women are designated animals, she asses.
Hmm.
So this one is rather humorous. This citation actually deals with bestiality and women having sex with asses or animals. And so when we get in here, we begin to see that, so what they do is they take this one statement by one rabbi, aren't Gentiles called donkeys whose flesh is the flesh of donkeys? And then one of the rabbis says, whoa, wait a second, I'm going to report this. This is uncalled for. And then, but when we get into it, it cites Ezekiel 23:20. She lusted after her paramours, whose genitals were like those of donkeys, with emissions like those of horses. So they're talking about, so what does the quote say? Women, gentile women, are designated animals. It's talking about lusting after people
Right.
who had genitals the size of donkeys and horses. So all of this is spun out of context, and this Keratot 6b does not exist and is a fabrication.
Hmm.
This Keratot deals with sin, keret or sin, and those whom are punished and prevented from heaven. And so, we can see these citations here, forbidden to eat the fat or eat blood, etc. So constantly, this stuff is taken out of context. And then if we go over to the Quran, 8.55, to Allah there are no animals viler than those who do not believe and remain unbelievers. In other words, the kafir are the Christians and the Jews, those who reject the truth among the people of the book and among the polytheists will abide in hellfire. They are the worst of creatures. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see this stuff throughout the
Fascinating.
let
Yep.
me just get out of full screen here.
Mm-hmm.
If I can find it. Hold on a second.
No, that's okay.
I was on the other monitor. So, what we can see is when we go through all of these, and like I said, almost a third are entirely fabricated. But, so they were drastically taken out of context. And there was only one that ended up being true. And that was, I think it's number 42 or number 43. I guess I should have shown that before I
That's all right. I
canceled
mean,
the show.
it's all either false or out of context, and and yet I think that it fits neatly. Besides the possible Islamic angle of trying to attack and destroy Judaism, it also fits neatly into a Christian understanding of Judaism as after Jesus having become like a kind of basically a debating society without belief in God and without belief in logos, which is also untrue, because yes, we have the legalistic element there, but the Talmud is just a law book, as you said, or a series of books. We do believe in God. We've been walking with God for thousands of years before Jesus.
Correct.
It's entirely consistent with Torah to have questions and to have debates, but it doesn't advocate anything that contradicts the Torah, which is the word of
So,
God.
and then the only one that was true was Shabbat 116a. The Jews must destroy the books of the Christians. And that was the one that ended up being true. Now, the irony of all of this is the Christians go around saying the Talmud is the most evil book ever written, and every copy should be destroyed.
Right.
So,
Who
so
destroyed whose books? And also, look, let's. I mean, the bottom line is that there's some nasty things said in Christian doctrines, including the New Testament, about Jews, and that there were nasty things said in Jewish doctrines about Christianity and about Jesus, but not the Talmud. Most of the stuff that is said about Jesus was done in this book called the Book of Jesus, Jehu Yesh, Toldot Yeshu, which is not Talmud. It's a very bad book. I'm not certainly going to deny that, but it was not part of the Jewish religion, and it did say things about Jesus that really should not have been said, certainly not by a Jew. So, the point I'm making here is that there was hard feelings. It was like a civil war. There was a breakdown of relation between the two faiths, and that there was some nasty stuff thrown on both sides in the very
you
beginning.
know
Yes.
and the irony of all of this is that between the two religions all high cultures are established. So when we combine the Old Testament laws with the New Testament and Jesus being logos incarnate, it shows us the proper way to live by the laws essentially, and to have a thriving high functioning society, which is what we see across Europe, especially Northern Europe. So, and then up until we see the breakdown with the Nazis' inclusion with Islam, and then of course the Grand Mufti of Palestine was one of Hitler's top generals running the Bosnian Muslim Hanjar that
Right.
massacred tens of thousands of Serbian Orthodox Christians and Jews,
Yes.
etc.
I mean, I just to interject here, I actually wrote a book on this topic called the Nazi Connection of Islamic Terrorism. I don't know if I would go so far as to say there was an outright collusion between, the Nazis and Muslims, but Nazism was very popular in the Islamic world right up until the murder of Hitler or the death of Hitler, and then after that, the communists picked up the cudgels and continued on. Interesting subject for another day.
What
We could,
what we found in the when we were doing the series of shows on Islam is that the neo Nazis and the Islamist trolls got the exact same laundry lists of talking points nearly every day and updated every day between them. They all had the same talking points simultaneously.
Hmm.
And then, when we see the Grand Mufti sitting there with Hitler, there's large troops of Islamist Nazis who were bowing to Mecca
Yeah, the
that were under
Hanjars.
the, yeah, the
Exactly.
Hanjar. Right.
Listen, Jan, I'm going to have to leave it there for today because I want to do a series with you, and it's a wonderful, excellent piece of work, and I hope to make this number, the A in a long series. So I really appreciate you joining me this afternoon. Just again, let people know how they can check out your show and look at your website.
Yeah, logosmedia.com. And if you send a contribution with a note in there for, $10 or more, I will send you a copy of the ebook or the PDF for you to read over and begin to fact check this stuff yourself. It took me a year to get it finished, so I appreciate any contributions and help. The show is Unspun that you can find there or my channel. And I had, 80 hit piece videos and articles written against me over the last year and a half for exposing this stuff.
Right. Well,
So,
it's a tough business. Anyways, Jan, I want to thank you again for joining me this afternoon.
all right, Charles, have a good one.
All right, you too.
Take care.